The film opens as we enter an opulent mansion of a Punjabi family in New Delhi. Rocky Randhawa narrates to the audience through a jocular voice over that Randhawa Paradise is the first replica of the White House. This empire has been built by his fraternal grandmother, the tyrannical taskmaster Dhanlakshmi Randhawa, who started a sweetmeats business selling lattice in Indian sweet. A flashback shows Dhanlakshmi's past when she was married to Kanwal Lund Randhawa. He was the son of a sweet maker, but to her disappointment, he was more interested in poetry than business. One day, Kanwal fell, which permanently damaged his memory, and he became wheelchair-bound. Dhanlakshmi kept their son, Tijori, away from Kanwal and influenced him to focus on business. She got him married to Poonam for them to have a son to inherit the empire. Rocky remarks that even though their sweet business was booming, their familial bonds became increasingly bitter. We cut back to the present. As an adult, Rocky wakes up in his bedroom. He is a wealthy, handsome young man with a good physique and a flamboyant fashion sense, but speaks in broken English. He dances to a song at a party with several women. As the song ends, her grandmother and father reprimand him for not behaving like the future CEO of their company and making a fool of himself like a Bollywood item dancer. Rocky feels upset, but respects his father enough to not retaliate. Later, Tijori wins the award for Punjabi of the Year. The anchor starts reciting poetry by Furak while Kanwal is in the audience. This triggers Kanwal, and he keeps repeating the name of a woman named Jamini. Later at night, the doctor makes a house visit. She urges the family to take care of his health and memory. She suggests finding out who Jamini is, as it might kickstart his memory. This makes Dhanlakshmi angry, as there might have been another woman in his life. When Rocky asks Kanwal about her, he points to a red book in his library, which contains a black and white photograph of Jamini. Next day, Rocky tries to find her online and stumbles upon a blog post written by Rani Chatterjee. His friend, Vicky, recognizes her as a celebrity TV news host. Intercut with this, a montage introduces Rani, a pretty and striking young woman. She gets ready and walks onto the set. Her producer, Sum, looks at her with puppy eyes as he tells her that the interviewee for the day is a powerful politician. The politician and Rani's tension-fueled interaction begins. Meanwhile, Rocky and his friend arrive at the news studio. Rani confronts the politician for not making a statement about a recent sexual assault incident. He dismisses it and feels it's not important to comment on every case. This irks Rani, but he doubles down on his chauvinistic opinions and blames women and their provocative clothing for it. Rani relentlessly hits back at him and insults him for his disgusting mind and blatant objectification of women, which makes the politician walk off the set. After the interview, Rocky enters Rani's cabin. She completely judges his gaudy sense of style, but finds him amusing as he immediately begins flirting with her in his broken English. She can't help but get distracted by his abs. He catches her in the act, but she apologizes for objectifying him. However, he takes it sportingly and doesn't mind people admiring something he's worked hard for. He introduces himself as the heir of Dhanlakshmi Sweets, but doesn't have the attitude of a South Delhi rich brat. He asks her if Jamini Chatterjee is her grandmother. He beams with joy to find out Rani's grandmother Jamini is alive, and he could make her reunite with his grandfather. Rani agrees to fix the meeting. As they exit, Rocky continues flirting with her, and she can't help but give in. Later, Rani walks into a grand old bungalow and introduces us to her Bengali family. Her mother, Anjali, is Delhi University's senior-most English professor, who has a habit of using complicated English words. She meets her father, Shandon, a famous Kathak dancer, who is teaching a dance class to a bunch of students. Finally, she introduces Jamini, who loves poetry and old Bollywood songs. They greet each other with a kiss. This house, full of warm and aesthetic interiors, is the polar opposite of the Randhawas. Later in the evening, Rani and her family lay the dinner table. Anjali rebukes her for declining Sum's invitation, as she thinks he's a perfect match for her. Shandon reminds her that Rani did try to date him, but they broke up after 3 months. He pokes fun at him for being a bad lover, as he looks like someone who lacks rhythm. Rani agrees that there is hardly any chemistry between them. Jamini thinks chemistry is not to be sought. Love comes when you least expect it, like a storm. This reminds Rani of Rocky, who stormed into her office today. Rani mentions that his grandfather is a man named Kanwal Lund. Jamini gets shocked. She leaves the table and locates his photograph from her cupboard. She tells Rani that she can never forget the week she spent with Kanwal in Shimla. It was a poetry symposium, and they bonded over a poem by Furak. Soon, they fell in love. However, they were both in committed marriages, which didn't give them the courage to act on it, and they decided to part ways. Next day, at the Randhawa mansion, a typical arranged marriage meeting is underway. A suitor has come to meet Gayatri, nicknamed Galu, which translates to round. Gayatri has a habit of mixing up words, but the prospective groom's family rejects her for being overweight. After they leave, Tijori asks his daughter to stay silent if she can't speak properly. But Dan Lakshmi reminds them that their Galu has been rejected 50 times, and yet she refuses to lose weight. She blames Poonam's genes for this. Rocky spiritedly offers to help his sister, but Gayatri is upset and walks away in a huff. Next morning, Rocky is at work when he gets a phone call from Ronnie. They flirt again, and Ronnie can't help but laugh at his jokes. She finds him extremely unique. She gets to the point right away and wants him to meet her. They meet at Vicky's wrestling arena, where she brings Suman along. Rocky greets them, but playfully teases her for bringing her brother along for safety. Suman gets offended and clarifies that he is her colleague. Rocky looks confused and then asks him if he's from her mother's side or father's side. Rocky's misunderstanding of the word colleague with cousin makes Ronnie chuckle. Later, Ronnie informs him that Jamini has agreed to meet Kanwal, but they must decide the place. Rocky suggests they come over to his house. She thinks this could have been discussed over a phone call, but she flirtatiously tells him she wanted to check him out again. As the dance party begins, Rocky and Ronnie dance to a song, and their chemistry is increasingly palpable. Next morning, Ronnie's family arrives at the Randhawa mansion. Dan Lakshmi doesn't look pleased. Kanwal enters in a wheelchair, and Jamini meets him. He doesn't remember her. She tries to jog his memory by mentioning the Furak poem and their favorite song, but he can't recall. Alas, they leave the house in disappointment. Suddenly, Kanwal bursts into a song. Jamini is stunned that he remembers their favorite song. He gets up from his chair and walks towards her to embrace her. Dan Lakshmi's heart is her mouth, and she faints when Kanwal kisses Jamini. Later, Vicky gives Rocky a reality check. He can only read the ingredients on the back of a protein supplement, and Ronnie is too educated and classy for him. He doesn't have the artistic and poetic side of his grandfather either, but Rocky thinks it's in his genes. And if his grandfather could do it, he can get a Chatterjee girl too. That following night, Rocky turns up at the Chatterjee house bearing gifts. He openly flirts with Ronnie in front of Anjali and Suman, which irks them, but makes Jamini happy. They talk and decide to make Kanwal and Jamini meet again in secret. Set to a montage of old Bollywood songs, Kanwal and Jamini rekindle their romance, while Rocky and Ronnie begin their passionate relationship. Later, Jamini confronts Ronnie about her feelings for Rocky, but she denies any feelings of love and calls it a fling. Jamini doesn't want her to run away from her feelings, but gives her an important piece of advice. The steering wheel of her relationship might be in her hands, but it's always the family doing the backseat driving. Next morning, Rocky calls Ronnie while she's at work. He finds out that it's her birthday tomorrow, but Ronnie isn't excited to celebrate. Later that evening, Suman asks Ronnie if she has any birthday plans while exiting the office. Just then, Rocky turns up in his car, loudly playing a Bollywood song, and asks her to go for a long drive. She reluctantly agrees to go with him. He brings her to an old junk shop where he has planned a surprise. He knows she doesn't like cakes, which is why he has got her a giant laddu. Ronnie is floored by his kind and adorable gesture. He gives her a long, tight hug and goes down on his knee. Ronnie freaks out and stops him. She wants to go home and celebrate with her family. The night ends on an awkward note. Next day at work, Suman tells Ronnie that they have to go to Kashmir for a work trip. Later, Rocky invites Ronnie to his house. As she walks into a room, which is dimly lit, the lights turn on to a dazzling setup. There is a spotlight on Rocky as he sits on a throne wearing a royal costume. He explains that he could sense that she got awkward the night before. He knows it was because she found the setting very low-key. He wanted to make a grand gesture and propose to her properly. Ronnie confesses that whatever is happening between them is a lot of fun. But it's not a love story. It's a lust story. And it's purely physical for her. She thinks they are very different people and don't know each other well enough to commit. He says his grandmother used to give him a piece of advice: never be too sweet or you'll be eaten up. He breaks up with her. As they walk out the door, they find Dan Lakshmi and Tijori standing right outside. They angrily walk away as Rocky and Ronnie realize they heard their entire conversation. Later, Rocky is reprimanded by Tijori and Dan Lakshmi, and he cries to his grandfather. Ronnie drowns her sorrows in alcohol at a bar with Suman. She asks him to hug her, but she doesn't feel what she felt when Rocky used to hug her. She goes to Kashmir, but all she can think of is Rocky. She imagines him everywhere, singing a song to her. Her feelings grow stronger, and the song ends with her rushing back home with a renewed sense of purpose. She turns up outside his office, playing the same song he played for her. She wants him to get into her car this time and go for a long drive, but Rocky gets in his own car and drives away. She starts chasing him. He tries to dodge her, but their cars end up colliding. They get out of the cars and get into a shouting match. She makes him shut up and wants to be the one to talk this time. She confesses her love to him and admits she was wrong about him. She goes down on her knee and wants him to give their love story another chance. They reconcile and embrace, but after the romantic moment passes, they have to figure out how they will make it work. Next day, Rocky and Ronnie discuss where they will live after the wedding. He wants her to live in his mansion, but Ronnie refuses. Him living in her house won't solve the problem either. The main idea is for their families to accept each other and their differences. She repeats her grandmother's advice about the family doing the backseat driving. He points out a logical flaw in this theory, as it's not physically possible to drive from the back seat. They start arguing playfully, and he casually states that there's no solution to this. Does she want him to live with her family, and he will move into her house? This is when Ronnie has an epiphany and thinks this is the real solution. Next day, they float the idea to their respective families. Anjali and Shandon are against the idea, but Jamini is open to it. Meanwhile, Rocky's family is more aggressive, but surprisingly Dan Lakshmi agrees. Tijori is shocked how his mother didn't put up a fight, but reveals her real intentions to her son later. She points out to Tijori that Rocky is blinded by love. This will later turn into rebellion, and he will leave the house. There will be no one left to inherit the family business. She wickedly assures him that Ronnie might think she's coming here for 3 months, but she won't last a week. Dan Lakshmi will be the one to put an end to this silly love story. Rocky and Ronnie start living at each other's homes. After some adjustment issues and stonewalling from both families, they start to make some headway. Dan Lakshmi keeps making subtle digs at Ronnie, insisting that she's merely a guest. But when Ronnie helps out Poonam in the kitchen and makes Kanwal take his medicines on time, the family starts to warm up to her. Ronnie notices that Gayatri is good with numbers and should pursue her interest in stock market trading. She catches Poonam singing beautifully when she's alone and urges her to pursue her passion. Poonam declines, saying not everyone has that privilege. Besides, she enjoys serving her husband. Ronnie reminds her that one-sided service is actually called slavery. Ronnie also helps Dan Lakshmi Sweets increase their business by turning around an unsuccessful advertising campaign. Rocky makes the Chatterjees laugh and accept his bear hugs, but they find him uncultured and backward. They point out his upbringing is deeply problematic. Dan Lakshmi taught him drinking tea turns the skin dark, but he reminds them that he's a supporter of Black Lives Matter and loves hip-hop music. Although, when he sees Shandon dancing to Kathak, his toxic masculinity comes forth. He is also faced with the task of making his own coffee and doing his own laundry and chores. Jamini is hopeful and believes Rocky and Ronnie will realize their unfulfilled dreams. Kanwal also gives Ronnie his blessings. However, Dan Lakshmi is a hard nut to crack. Ronnie comes to her sweet shop to extend an olive branch. Ronnie praises her for having the same passion for her work and making lattice every morning. In this way, they are quite alike. Dan Lakshmi thanks her for helping them with the ad campaign, even if she's only a house guest. Ronnie thought this was going well, but Dan Lakshmi firmly states that they are not alike. For Ronnie, her own self comes first, but for her, she will always put her family first. Ronnie retorts that a career woman can also value her family, and believes a person like her should understand this better than others. Her empire is even named after her own name. As far as making ties with a family is concerned, she believes where hearts are one, ties will be made. Dan Lakshmi has no comeback for her words. Rocky wants to celebrate Ronnie's win at Vicky's wedding function. Rocky's family is already there, and Ronnie's family arrives for the occasion. Dan Lakshmi takes the opportunity to hit back at Ronnie. She announces that there is a famous Kathak dancer in their midst, Shandon. Shandon takes the stage and thanks Dan Lakshmi for giving him the opportunity to dance at this occasion. As Shandon begins to dance, people start laughing and heckling. Shandon finally notices that people are laughing at him. Ronnie spots Rocky laughing as well. Soon, Shandon feels embarrassed and gets off the stage. Later at night, Rocky enters the Chatterjee house. He looks remorseful and sincerely apologizes. Shandon accepts his apology, since he's used to such reactions. Ever since he told his father he wants to learn Kathak, he has made fun of him as well, but he persisted because his mother stood by him. This makes Rocky cry, and he thinks he has messed up badly. He calls his life a bitch, but Anjali protests to him using misogynistic abuses. Rocky gives up and goes on a tirade about how he's trying to improve, but he has to be given a chance. He realizes that he can unknowingly use misogynistic slurs, or even fat shame his own sister by nicknaming her Golu. This felt normal in childhood, and they weren't taught that a person can get hurt by such words. Although, he has been hurt too by their attitude towards him as well. His biggest drawback is that he can't speak English properly, and that they were willing to cancel him for it. If they keep canceling each other like this, nobody will learn and grow. He thought he would come here and win their hearts, but nobody even gave him a hug. Today, he was touched by what Shandon said, because he also loves to dance. He never had the guts to dance in front of his father, but has respect for Shandon. On this note, he bids them goodbye and thanks them for giving him a place in their home. Shandon stops and gives him a hug. Anjali's heart melts as well. Ronnie calls her father. She thinks she should return home. This isn't working. Shandon tells her to stay put, but Ronnie can't get over the fact they were laughing at him. She can't believe she saw Rocky laughing as well. This is not something she can forgive. Shandon tells her that he also laughed at Rocky. Neither are the Randhawas perfect, nor are the Chatterjees. Love isn't meant to be perfect. This puts Ronnie in deep thought. Next morning, Rocky comes to Shandon's dance class and starts learning how to dance. He makes a serious effort to change himself, from making his own coffee to doing his own chores. Ronnie lands Gayatri a job at her TV network. Poonam starts practicing her singing, thanks to Ronnie's support. Tijori remarks to his wife that his father only listens to Ronnie now. Poonam reminds that he never got the permission to accept him as his own father. This statement makes an impression on Tijori. One day, Ronnie informs Poonam that she sent her entry to a talent show on TV and she got selected. To Ronnie's surprise, Poonam doesn't take the news well. She can't believe she did this without her consent. She thinks Ronnie can afford to be rebellious, but not her. Next morning, another suitor comes to visit Gayatri. This meeting is even worse than the previous one, as they blatantly say they want a big, ugly girl who can at least be faithful, since she won't get attention from other men. When they ask Gayatri if she has any hobbies, she starts singing a vulgar song. This shocks the family. Later, when the suitor and his family have left, Dan Lakshmi slaps Gayatri. She goes on to blame Rocky for this, since these words coming out of Galu's mouth are not her own, but have been fed by Ronnie. Gayatri stands by her words and tells Dan Lakshmi to stop calling her Galu and casually fat-shaming her. She wants to be called Gayatri. They are the reason for her losing her self-respect, her eating disorder, and her habit of speaking the wrong words. She puts her foot down and tells them she's joining the India Now network and will only get married when she feels like it. Poonam rises up to the occasion and asks Ronnie if the audition is at 7 p.m. Ronnie wishes her good luck. Tijori and Dan Lakshmi are left speechless. Next morning, Tijori turns down the invitation to attend Durga Puja celebrations hosted by the Chatterjees, but Ronnie asks him to come for Goddess Durga, if not for them. That following night, they attend the celebration. Shandon announces that every year they perform a cultural dance to kickstart the celebration. But not this year. This year, they break their anti-Bollywood stance and try something new. Shandon starts to dance to a Bollywood song, and to the shock of the Randhawas, Rocky joins him. Ronnie joins them too, much to the horror of Dan Lakshmi, Tijori and some. After this, Ronnie goes to the Randhawas and wants to bring them along to pay respects to the idol of the goddess, but Dan Lakshmi snubs her and leaves. Ronnie gets disappointed, but gestures to Rocky to go behind the family. He doesn't wish to. She insists that he should handle the situation. Rocky is angry, but stops his father. Tijori tells Rocky that he doesn't belong to them anymore. He has become a dancing monkey, like Ronnie's family. He launches into an attack on the family, calling them immoral and rotten. Ronnie tries to intervene and defend her family, but Tijori doesn't stop his attack. Tijori tells Rocky to stop her from blowing the situation out of proportion. Rocky doesn't. Ronnie continues telling him that her family doesn't live in fear and respect each other, and if that makes them immoral, then so be it. Tijori points his finger at her and tells Rocky to shut her up. Ronnie shrugs his hand off and demands to speak. If he has the capacity to speak his mind, he must listen to her when she voices her opinion as well. This is when Rocky stops Ronnie and questions her for raising her hand against his father. Ronnie clarifies that she didn't hit his father, but Rocky doesn't let go of the fact that she reacted physically and disrespected his father. She thinks if it's a matter of disrespect, then her father faced humiliation repeatedly. He gives up and says that she's always been right. They are very different indeed. Then, Ronnie lands the final blow. Their differences may never end, but this relationship has ended. As Ronnie walks out, she tells Dan Lakshmi that she was wrong about herself the other day. Yet again, she has kept only one woman happy in her family and not the rest of them. She coldly pays her respects and exits. Later at the Chatterjee home, Shandon gives Ronnie a reality check. Whatever the provocation, she shouldn't have raised her hand. Ronnie still believes she didn't raise her hand. Anjali agrees with Shandon, and Ronnie can't believe how they are all taking Rocky's side. Anjali admits that she was wrong about him. Ronnie gets frustrated. They should understand that Rocky is his father's child after all, and will end up repeating his father's patterns of behavior. Anjali doesn't want her to forget that he is also his mother's child. However, Ronnie thinks he doesn't stand by his mother, and he will never stand by his wife in the future as well. She seeks Jamini's support by reminding her that she told her that family does the backseat driving, but Jamini has had a change of heart and thinks Rocky is built differently. Ronnie crosses a line by attacking Jamini. She believes she shouldn't have taken her relationship advice at all, since she cheated on her husband. Jamini admits that she cheated, but has no regrets about it. All she regrets is suffering in silence. She reveals that her grandfather used to hit her and Shandon. If she wants to judge Tijori, she should look into her own backyard. Her grandfather looked gentle on the outside, but inside he was exactly like Tijori. However, Shandon did not turn out like his father. Similarly, Rocky is unlike his father. Ronnie starts to cry as she listens to some cold, hard truths. Meanwhile, Dan Lakshmi is shouting at her family. She knew Ronnie would wreak havoc within them. Tijori feels humiliated as well. Poonam switches the TV on, and her audition for the talent show is playing. She's singing beautifully, but Tijori switches it off. Poonam doesn't say a word. Instead, she continues singing the song in the room. She stares into Tijori's face with newfound courage, and then goes to Rocky and caresses his face. Gayatri also stands by her mother. Tijori comes forward and raises his hand to slap her, but Rocky stops him. Dan Lakshmi thinks Rocky has lost his senses, but Rocky wants to tell them that this is the first time he has come to his senses. He has finally learned something he never knew before. All the years the respect that he had for them wasn't respect at all. It was only fear. He isn't scared anymore. He announces that he's leaving this home and renouncing his inheritance. Poonam and Gayatri decide to leave with him. Then, they hear a voice calling out Tijori's name. It's Kanwal. He heard everything, and he's sobbing. Tijori's heart melts, and he sits down next to his feet. He's surprised that his father finally spoke his name. Kanwal cries, and tells him that he taught him never to break up the family. Suddenly, Kanwal goes cold and his face goes numb. Tijori checks his pulse, and they call an ambulance in panic. They take Kanwal to the hospital. Tijori watches his father fighting for his life, and finally losing the battle. Tijori weeps remembering his childhood. Every attempt to connect with his father was foiled by his mother. Later, at the funeral, Rocky and Tijori light the pyre. Tijori can't control himself, and cries as Rocky gives him a helping hand. Just then, Jamini and Ronnie's family enter. Jamini seeks permission to bid her last goodbye, but Dan Lakshmi tells Tijori to ask them to leave. Tijori lets them. Ronnie wants to move towards a grieving Rocky, but he holds himself back. Later at night, Tijori sobs looking at his father's old pictures. Rocky gets a call from Ronnie, but doesn't pick up. Ronnie is disappointed that her call went unanswered. She goes to comfort Jamini, who seems despondent with grief. Jamini believes she has lost her soulmate. Meanwhile, at the Randhawa mansion, Tijori comes to Poonam. He tells her he can't deserve to offer an apology, but seeks her forgiveness. She declines his request immediately. With confidence, she tells him it's too late to say sorry. He is unworthy of her respect, and so is his mother. Despite being a woman, she never respected other women. In raising Tijori as the man of the house, she forgot he was not only hers, he was also meant to be his father's son, and a father to his own children. Most importantly, he was meant to be a good husband. Now, he gets to be imprisoned in regret, and she gets to be free. Dan Lakshmi calls Poonam an imbecile and a disgraceful woman for talking to her husband like this. Tijori stands up to her for the first time and tells her to talk to his wife respectfully first. Dan Lakshmi is shocked that her son shouted at her like this. She didn't raise him to see this day, but Tijori doesn't think she raised him at all. She only nurtured a hollow sense of arrogance. He thinks Poonam is right, but he wants a chance to earn forgiveness from her and will make all the effort in the future. He has lost his father, and he doesn't want to make the mistake of losing his wife and children. A few months pass. Ronnie enters her living room and finds Tijori and Poonam at her home. Tijori asks for forgiveness from Ronnie. He apologizes for his words, but Ronnie stops him. She apologizes for her words and actions. By insulting him, she belittled her and Rocky's love as well. Rocky may not forgive her, but she would like to be forgiven by his family. Tijori puts his hand on her head and blesses her. Poonam tells the family that they would want Rocky to become the son-in-law of the Chatterjees. If they have no objection, she turns towards Ronnie and tells her that if she agrees, then her heartbroken lover is waiting for her outside. Jamini, Shandon, and Anjali look thrilled. She runs outside, but she can't find him. The streets are empty. She turns a corner and spots him. He's got an elaborate wedding party with a band in tow. He plays their song, asking her to sit in the car and go on a long drive. But then he spots Ronnie tearing up. He tells the band to stop playing the music and read the vibe. His Ronnie is getting emotional. He comes to her, and she starts apologizing profusely. She doesn't know what got into her and what she was thinking to deny this connection. Rocky stops her from apologizing. He tells her this is Rocky and Ronnie's love story. She confesses that she loves him, and he confesses that he loves her from his last life. He tells the band to play the music again. Happy vibes are back on. They kiss as he lifts her up in his arms. Later, Ronnie reads a letter from Dan Lakshmi. It says that at this age, her pride won't allow her to think that she could be wrong, although she's sending her a peace offering. It's her secret family recipe of lattice. She trusts her not to make the same mistakes she made. She congratulates her for her wedding and blesses her with a long life. The film ends with a song playing on the soundtrack as Rocky and Ronnie get married.